Heiress who refused the Duke. Chapter 1. The Terms of the Will. May 1816, London. The morning room of the Granby townhouse on Grosvenor Square was a gilded cage, and Miss Clara Granby, for the first time in her 25 years, held the key. Sunlight, thick with dancing dust motes, fell across the vast mahogany table where Mr. Alistair Finch, her father's solicitor for 30 years, laid out the documents with a funereal solemnity that Clara found both touching and absurd. Her father, Josiah Granby, was 3 days in his grave. The man who had risen from a Welsh coal miner's son to own half the mines in South Wales, who had built an empire on anthracite and sheer bloody-minded will, was gone. And Clara, his only child, was now, according to the law, one of the wealthiest heiresses in England. She was also, according to the same law, a cipher, a woman. But her father had never seen her that way. He had taught her to read a balance sheet before she could dance a quadrille, to judge the quality of a coal seam by its glint, and to look a man in the eye when striking a bargain. She was not beautiful in the conventional porcelain doll sense. Her hair was a dark, no-nonsense brown, usually pinned in a severe style that spoke of efficiency. Her grey eyes were direct, often critical, and missed very little. She had her father's square jaw and his straight-backed posture. In London, they called her the Coal Queen behind their hands, a title that was half sneer, half grudging respect. Mr. Finch cleared his throat, his spectacles glinting. The bulk of the estate is, as you know, unentailed. The mines, the shipping interests, the foundry in Merthyr Tydfil, and this house all pass directly to you, Miss Clara. Clara nodded. As we arranged, the manager's reports are still coming in quarterly. They are. Your father trusted your head for figures. He paused, the skin around his eyes crinkling with a flicker of deep discomfort. However, there is a specific clause, a condition of your inheritance. A cold thread of apprehension wove through Clara's composure. Her father was many things, a tyrant in business, a loving parent in private, but he was not a man given to whimsy. Go on. The clause pertains to the Granby fortune, the liquid capital and a significant portion of the industrial holdings. To retain full, unfettered control of the entire estate, you must be married within 1 year of the date of his passing. The silence in the room was absolute. Clara felt as though the air had been stolen from her lungs. She stared at Mr. Finch, waiting for the punchline, for him to reveal this was some macabre joke. He did not smile. Married, she repeated, her voice flat with disbelief. He wished for me to be married. His reasoning, as outlined in a private letter he left for you, was that the world is not kind to women of property alone. He feared you would be preyed upon. He believed a husband of your choosing would provide a shield. A shield? Clara shot to her feet, a rare flush of anger staining her cheeks. I don't need a shield. I need a clear line of credit and a reliable pit manager in Pontypridd. He taught me to be a lion, Mr. Finch, and now he expects me to find a keeper. She snatched the letter from the solicitor's hand. It was in her father's crabbed, urgent script. My dearest Clara, my lion heart. I have seen how the vultures circle a fortune when the man is gone. A husband, a man of name and standing will be your armour. Choose wisely, my clever girl, for the heart is a poor guide in matters of survival. Forgive your foolish old father. The anger drained out of her, leaving a profound weariness. He had meant well. In his own maddeningly patriarchal way, he had been trying to protect her. But he had also, in the final act of his life, chained her to the very institution from which she had sought freedom. The London season was just beginning, and the news would travel faster than a groom on a fast horse. Within a week, every fortune-hunting nobleman with a crumbling estate and a title to trade would be beating a path to her door. If I do not marry, she asked, her back still to him. Then 50% of the industrial concerns, the mines, the foundry, the shipping line, are to be sold, and the proceeds distributed to a list of charitable institutions he has named. You would retain this house, a substantial annual income, and your independence, but the heart of your father's empire would be broken up. He had given her a choice, her empire or her freedom. He had forced her to gamble with her own life's work. The news, as predicted, detonated across the Tun with the force of a cannonball. The Duke of Ashworth was among the first to hear it, though not in a glittering ballroom or a stuffy gentleman's club. He heard it in his study at Ashworth House, a magnificent but decaying mausoleum of a London residence, while staring at a ledger that seemed to bleed red ink. Alexander Thorne, the 6th Duke of Ashworth, was a man carved from granite and old regrets. At 34, his face was all sharp planes and hard lines, his dark hair perpetually dishevelled, his grey eyes holding the weary cynicism of a man who had spent a decade watching his heritage crumble between his fingers. His title was ancient, his lineage impeccable, and his coffers utterly empty. His estate agent, a harassed-looking man named Briggs, stood before him, twisting his cap in his hands. "The roof at the Dower House, Your Grace. It cannot see another winter, and the tenants at the home farm are a full quarter behind on their rent. If we cannot mend the drainage in the lower fields by Michaelmas, we'll lose the spring planting." Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose. "And my mother's allowance?" "Her Grace has requisitioned it for the quarter already, Your Grace. The dressmaker's bills." "Of course." His mother, the Dowager Duchess, lived in a state of splendid denial, convinced that a new gown or a lavish dinner party would somehow conjure the money from the ether. He dismissed Briggs with a heavy heart and poured himself a glass of brandy he could not afford. The Ashworth estate, once one of the wealthiest in Derbyshire, was dying. His father and grandfather had bled it dry with their excesses, leaving Alexander to preside over its slow, agonizing demise. He had tried everything: economies, new farming techniques, selling off parcels of land. But it was like bailing water from a sinking ship with a teacup. He needed a fortune, a vast, vulgar, industrial fortune. And then his friend Lord Peter Milton burst into the room without knocking, his round face flushed with excitement. "Ashworth, have you heard? It's the talk of whites." "I've heard that Brougham made a fool of himself in the Lords again, if that's what you mean." No, it's the Granby heiress, the Coal Queen. Her father's will has a clause. She must marry within a year or lose half her fortune. Half! Can you imagine?" Alexander went very still. He knew of Granby. Everyone did. New money, old coal. The man had been a Titan, and his daughter. "She's refused the first 3 this morning, apparently," Milton chattered on. "Some baron or other, can't remember his name. They say she's as plain as a pikestaff and has a tongue like a viper. But Lord, the money, 50,000 a year they're whispering, and the industrial concerns, mines, foundries, it's a king's ransom." As Milton spoke, a cold, hard plan began to form in Alexander's mind. It was repugnant. It was mercenary. It was his only hope. He would not offer for her as a lovesick swain. He was incapable of such a charade. He would offer her a business proposition, a merger. He would give her his name, his protection, his entree into a society that would otherwise shun her. She would give him the capital to save his ancestral home, his tenants, his very identity. It was a partnership. Nothing more. He would go to her not with a bouquet of roses, but with a balance sheet. Clara's refusal of Lord Alton, a balding baronet with damp hands and a fascination with her coal dividends, was her third of the day. She delivered it in her late father's study, surrounded by the maps of her kingdom, and felt a grim satisfaction as he was shown out. But her satisfaction was short-lived. The next day, at Lady Jersey's exclusive ball, an event Clara attended more from anthropological curiosity than social ambition, she felt the shift in the air. The whispers were no longer just behind fans. They were direct. Men she had never met approached her with a predatory gleam in their eyes. They spoke not of the weather or the music, but of her excellent prospects and the admirable condition of her inheritance. She felt like a prize heifer at a county fair. And then she saw him. He was standing by one of the towering marble columns, a lone figure in a sea of peacock-coloured coats. He was tall, with the lean, hard look of a man who spent more time on a horse than in a ballroom. His evening clothes were of impeccable cut, but lacked the glittering embellishment of his peers. He was not handsome in any conventional sense. His features were too severe, his expression too guarded. But there was a power in his stillness, a weight to his presence that made the chattering crowd around him seem frivolous and insignificant. Their eyes met across the room, and Clara felt a jolt, a strange, electric awareness that was entirely unwelcome. "That," murmured a voice at her elbow, "is the Duke of Ashworth. They say he hasn't set foot in a London ballroom in 5 years. You should be flattered, Miss Granby. The wolves are circling, and it seems the lion has come to inspect the prey." It was Lady Milton, a kind but sharp-eyed woman who had been one of the few to offer Clara genuine friendship. "The lion looks as though he's forgotten how to smile," Clara replied, forcing herself to look away. "He's forgotten how to do a great many things, I imagine. His family has been dying a slow death for 3 generations. Gossip says he can barely afford to keep the roof over his head. He's desperate, my dear, and desperate men are dangerous." Clara knew dangerous. She had negotiated with mine managers who would have sacrificed their own grandmothers for an extra shilling a ton, but this was a different kind of danger. This was a man who would wager his title, his history, his very name, on a single roll of the dice. And she was the dice. He did not approach her that night. He simply watched. It was unnerving. It was infuriating. It was intriguing. And Clara, who trusted no one and nothing she could not quantify, found that intriguing was the most dangerous feeling of all. Chapter 2. A Proposition. June, 1816. The morning called for her at 11 o'clock precisely. Clara, who had spent the previous hour reviewing shipping manifests from Cardiff, received his card with a mixture of annoyance and anticipation she refused to acknowledge. The Duke of Ashworth. She should have known he would not be content to simply watch from across a ballroom. She received him in the same study where she had learned of her father's condition. It was her territory, her fortress of ledgers and maps. He filled the doorway for a moment, a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette against the light of the hall, before stepping inside. In the bright morning light, he looked even more formidable, and more tired. There were shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Your Grace," she said, remaining seated behind the massive desk. It was a conscious power play, and they both knew it. "This is an unexpected hour for a social call." "It is not a social call, Miss Granby." His voice was deep, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air between them. He did not sit until she gestured to the chair opposite her. "I will not waste your time with pleasantries. You strike me as a woman who appreciates directness." "I appreciate efficiency, Your Grace. They are not always the same thing." A flicker of something, amusement, respect, crossed his hard features. "Then I shall be efficient. My name is Alexander Thorne. I am the Duke of Ashworth. My family has held lands in Derbyshire since the Conquest. We have served kings, fought in crusades, and sat in the House of Lords for centuries. And we are, to put it bluntly, insolvent." Clara kept her expression carefully neutral, but her mind was racing. She had never heard a nobleman admit to poverty so baldly. It was either breathtaking honesty or a brilliant new tactic in the game of fortune hunting. "I am aware of your situation, Your Grace. Gossip, as they say, is the coin of the realm." "Then you will also be aware of yours. You have a fortune without a name. I have a name without a fortune. It is the oldest transaction in the history of the English aristocracy." She felt a flash of cold anger. Transaction, an interesting choice of words. "Are you offering to buy me, Your Grace, or to sell yourself?" He leaned forward, his grey eyes intent. I am offering a merger, a partnership. I am not here to romance you, Miss Granby. I am not here to pretend to fall in love with you over a season of insipid waltzes and stale petits fours. I am here to propose a marriage of mutual convenience. He laid a sheet of paper on the desk between them. It was not a poem or a love letter. It was a list. The terms, he said. In the event of this union, you will bring your fortune. It will be used, in the first instance, to settle the most pressing debts on the Ashworth estate and to begin essential repairs, roofs, drainage, tenant farms. The estate will be managed jointly. I will not touch a penny of your personal capital without your express consent. In return, you will become a duchess. You will have a position in society that no amount of money can buy. You will be protected from the fortune hunters, and you will have your freedom. My freedom, she echoed, sceptical. My primary residence is in Derbyshire. I have no desire to spend my days in London. You may live here, in this house, or travel, or manage your business concerns as you see fit. I will not interfere. I will not demand companionship. The slight hesitation before the last word told her precisely what he meant. He was offering a marriage in name only. We would, of course, be required to appear together for certain functions, to present a united front. But in private, your life is your own. Clara stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. She had prepared herself for fawning compliments, for veiled references to her wealth, for the usual arsenal of the suitor. She had not prepared for this, for a man who laid out his desperation like a merchant displaying his wares, for a proposition so cold, so clinical, so devoid of pretense that it circled back to something almost like honour. And what do you gain, beyond the money? She asked, her voice quieter now. Survival. The word was raw, stripped of all pride. My tenants, Miss Granby. Hundreds of families who have lived on Ashworth land for generations. If the estate fails, they fail. Their children go hungry. Their homes crumble. My duty is to them. My father and grandfather forgot that duty in their pursuit of pleasure. I will not. I will do whatever it takes to preserve what is theirs by right as much as mine. He spoke with a quiet intensity that was far more compelling than any declaration of love. This was a man driven by something deeper than greed. It was a sense of responsibility so ingrained it was like breathing. Clara understood duty. She had learned it at her father's knee. It was the one language they both spoke fluently. She looked down at the paper. It was a list, but it was also a confession. Every debt, every obligation, every crumbling wall was laid bare. It was an act of profound vulnerability, and she suspected he knew it. Why me? She asked. There are other heiresses, prettier ones. Ones whose fathers were born with silver spoons instead of coal dust under their nails. Because the others would want a romance, he said simply. They would want pretty speeches and stolen kisses. They would want to be a duchess. You, I suspect, want to be Josiah Granby's daughter. You want to run his empire. I am the only man in London who will let you do that. I am the only man who is offering you a partnership, not a cage. He was right. God help her, he was right. Every other suitor saw her as a gateway to wealth. He saw her as a means to an end, yes, but he was honest about it. And in his honesty, he offered her the one thing no one else had, the chance to keep her own life. I will need time to consider, she said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Of course, take a week. But Miss Granby? He rose, and for the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. It did not soften his face, but it made him seem human. The season waits for no one, and your father's clock is ticking. He bowed, a correct formal gesture, and let himself out. Clara sat in the silence for a long time, staring at the list. The man had laid his soul bare on her desk, and it looked like a column of debts. She refused him publicly 3 days later. It was at the Richmond House Ball, the most anticipated event of the season. The garden had been transformed into a fairyland of lanterns and silk-draped pavilions. The cream of society was there, and the talk, as it had been for weeks, was of the Coal Queen and the desperate Duke. Clara saw him across the crowded terrace. He was watching her again, a solitary figure in the shadows. She had made her decision. The cold logic of his proposal was sound, but something in her rebelled against it. Against the neat, transactional nature of it. Against the idea of binding herself to a man who looked at her as a solution to a mathematical problem. Her father had wanted her to choose a husband. She would choose, but she would not be chosen like a bolt of cloth. When Lord Milton, acting as a sort of nervous herald, brought the Duke to her side, the whispers rose to a fever pitch. "Your Grace," Clara said, her voice clear and steady, pitched to carry. "I believe you have something you wish to ask me." Alexander's expression did not change, but she saw the faint tightening of his jaw. He knew what she was doing. She was forcing his hand, making him play out the scene in front of the very people who would devour them both. He got down on one knee. The sight of a duke kneeling to a coal miner's daughter sent a shockwave through the assembled crowd. A hush fell. "Miss Granby," he said, his voice low but perfectly audible. "I have come to ask for the honour of your hand in marriage." Clara looked down at him. The lantern light carved deep shadows into his face, making him look like a fallen angel. He was magnificent, even in his degradation, and she was about to refuse him. "You are most kind, Your Grace," she said, and her voice rang with false sweetness. "But I must decline. I have no wish to be a duchess. I have no wish to be a footnote in someone else's history. I am Clara Granby, and I intend to remain so." The silence that followed was so profound, she could hear the rustle of silk as a woman fainted somewhere in the crowd. Then the whispers began, a tidal wave of sound. She had refused a duke. She had humiliated him in public. She was mad. She was magnificent. She was ruined. She looked at Alexander, expecting to see rage, or at least cold contempt. What she saw was something else entirely. A flicker of surprise, yes, but beneath it, a grudging, almost admiring respect. And something else, something that looked almost like relief. He rose gracefully, bowed, and said, just loud enough for her to hear, "As you wish, Miss Granby. You have made your position exceptionally clear." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the centre of a circle of scandalized faces. She had won. She had asserted her independence in the most public way possible. So why did she feel as though she had just lost something she had never known she wanted? Chapter 3. The Terms of Engagement. The scandal was, as predicted, immense. For a fortnight, Clara Granby was the most talked-about woman in England. She was burned in effigy by desperate mammas who had hoped to see their daughters a duchess. She was hailed as a feminist pioneer by a few radical thinkers, and she was cut dead by half the hostesses in London. The other half, driven by a prurient curiosity to see the woman who had refused a duke, continued to invite her, if only to watch her squirm. Clara did not squirm. She attended the balls and the soirees with her head held high, her expression a mask of cool indifference. Inside, however, she was a churning mess of doubt and regret. Not regret at refusing him, that had been the right decision for the right reasons, but regret at the manner of it. She had made him a public spectacle, a figure of pity and ridicule. And she could not forget that look in his eyes, the respect, the relief. He appeared at her door a week after the ball. She was in her study, as always. He did not wait to be announced. He simply walked in, past the flustered butler, and stood before her desk. He looked terrible. His cravat was slightly askew, his coat rumpled. He looked like a man who had not slept or eaten properly in days. "You ruined me," he said without preamble. Clara's hand tightened on her pen. I refused a proposal, hardly a hanging offence. You did more than refuse. You made me a laughingstock. You made my name a joke. Do you have any idea how hard it will be for me to show my face in any club, any drawing room, any parliament after that? You have stripped me of the one thing I had left, my dignity. She felt a sharp stab of guilt, but she forced it down. Your dignity, Your Grace, or your pride. There is a difference. Your dignity is inherent. Your pride is merely what others think of you. I suspect you are too strong a man to let a social slight destroy you. He stared at her, his grey eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and, was it wonder? You are the most infuriating woman I have ever met. I am aware. It is one of my better qualities. She gestured to the chair. Sit down, Your Grace. You look as though you might fall down, and tell me why you are really here. He did not sit. Instead, he braced his hands on the edge of her desk and leaned forward, bringing his face close to hers. She could smell the clean, sharp scent of him, soap and starched linen and something else, something warmer and more dangerous. I am here, he said, his voice a low growl, because you are my only hope. Since your little performance, every other heiress and her mother has fled from me as though I carried the plague. They think me weak. They think me a failure. You have made me a pariah. And so, you are going to fix it. I am going to fix it. How, precisely? By throwing myself at your feet in public and begging for your forgiveness? I don't think so. No. He straightened, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of the strategic mind that must have once made him a formidable man. By accepting my original proposal, in private. She blinked. Have you run mad? I just refused you in front of half of London. Exactly. The scandal is too delicious. We will give them a new one. We will announce that your refusal was a misunderstanding, a fit of nerves, a lover's quarrel played out on a public stage. We will announce that, after a week of agonized separation, you have realized the error of your ways and accepted my hand. The ton loves a reconciliation. It's more romantic than a straightforward proposal. They will eat it up. Clara stared at him, her mind racing. It was brilliant. It was audacious. It was utterly mad. And it might just work. You want us to pretend, she said slowly, that we are... What? Lovers? That I was so overcome with passion for you that I panicked and refused you in front of everyone, only to come to my senses. Precisely. It gives you a motive other than simple contrariness. It paints you as a woman of deep feeling rather than a cold, calculating shrew. It paints me as a man who inspires such devotion that a woman would lose her head. It benefits us both. And the terms of our original agreement, my independence, my fortune, they remain the same. The marriage is a business arrangement. We will share a name, a house when necessary, and a convincing performance for the world. In private, you are still Clara Granby, the coal queen, and I am still the man trying to save his people. He paused, and his voice softened, just a fraction. I am not your enemy, Miss Granby. I am not your jailer. I am, if you will have me, your partner. She looked at him for a long, searching moment. The anger was gone from his eyes, replaced by a weariness that spoke of genuine desperation. He was not playing a game. He was fighting for the survival of his world. And she, in her pride, had made that fight 100 times harder. What of the other aspects of marriage? She asked, her cheeks warming despite herself. You mentioned no demands, but the world will expect an heir eventually. A flicker of something, desire, pain, crossed his face. The world can expect what it likes. That is a matter for another day. For now, we agree to a marriage of partnership. What grows from it, if anything grows, is a matter for the future. I will not press you. I give you my word. His word. The word of a duke. In Clara's experience, the word of a nobleman was often worth less than the paper it was written on. But looking into Alexander Thorne's tired, honest grey eyes, she found herself believing him. "All right," she said quietly. "All right. I accept, but on one condition." "Name it." "You will let me see the estate, Derbyshire, the tenants, the farms, the crumbling roofs. If I am to pour my father's fortune into this venture, I will see it with my own eyes. I will meet the people I am helping. I will not be a silent partner, Your Grace. I will be an active one." He stared at her for a moment, and then, for the first time, he smiled. A real smile, not the ghost she had seen before. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. It made her heart do a strange, uncomfortable lurch in her chest. "Agreed," he said. "I would expect nothing less from Josiah Granby's daughter." Their engagement was announced in the Gazette the following week. The Tun, as predicted, was beside itself with delight. The story was instantly romanticized. The haughty Duke, the proud heiress, the public refusal, the private reconciliation. It was better than a novel. Clara played her part with surprising ease, blushing at the right moments, casting adoring glances at her fiancé whenever they were in public. Alexander, for his part, was a master of the role, his hard features softening whenever he looked at her, his hand resting protectively at the small of her back. But in private, they were two strangers bound by a contract. They met to discuss the marriage settlements with their lawyers. They met to choose a date, a Tuesday in late August, unromantic and practical. They met to plan the guest list, as small as possible, they both agreed. And slowly, imperceptibly, the ice between them began to thaw. He asked her about her father, and she told him stories of the old man, his gruff affection, his pride in her sharp mind. She asked him about Derbyshire, and he described the wild beauty of the Peak District, the ancient oaks of his park, the faces of the children who lived on his land. They discovered a shared love of long walks and a shared impatience with fashionable nonsense. They were, Clara realized with a start, becoming friends. And with the friendship came a new tension. A tension that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the way her skin tingled when his hand brushed hers. The way his low laugh sent a shiver down her spine. The way she found herself watching his mouth when he spoke, wondering what it would feel like to kiss him. It was a complication she had not anticipated. A dangerous, thrilling, wonderful complication. Chapter 4. The Heiress Who Chose. August 1816. The Ashworth estate in Derbyshire was everything Alexander had described and more. It was magnificent and heartbreaking in equal measure. The house, a sprawling Elizabethan manor of mellow grey stone, sat in a fold of the hills like a sleeping giant. But the giant was sick. Weeds choked the gravel drive, paint peeled from the window frames. Inside, the grandeur was faded and threadbare, the magnificent rooms echoing and cold. Clara saw it all with a practised eye. She saw the dry rot in the library window, the sag in the great hall's ceiling, the desperate need for a new kitchen range. But she also saw the beauty beneath the decay. She saw the love in the careful carvings on the staircase, the history in the portraits of Alexander's ancestors, the life in the rolling green hills that stretched to the horizon. Alexander showed her around with a quiet pride that was touching. He did not apologize for the decay. He did not make excuses. He simply showed her his world, the good and the bad, and waited for her verdict. On the third day, he took her to meet the tenants. They visited the home farm, where the farmer's wife, Mrs. Atwell, showed Clara her dairy with shy pride. They visited a cluster of cottages in desperate need of new roofs, where children with thin faces and bright eyes stared at the grand lady from London. They visited an old widow, Mrs. Thorne, a distant cousin, Alexander explained, who lived alone in a tiny cottage and remembered Alexander's grandfather as a wastrel and a fool. "She's not wrong," Alexander murmured as they walked away. "She's lonely," Clara said. And proud. She would never ask for help, but she needs it. A new roof, a warm shawl for the winter, someone to check on her. He looked at her, surprised. You saw all that in 5 minutes. I saw a woman trying to survive. I've seen 1,000 like her in the villages near our mines. The only difference is the accent. She stopped walking and turned to face him. The wind swept across the hills, tugging at her bonnet, whipping a strand of dark hair across her face. I understand now, Alexander, why you're doing this. It's not about the house, or the title, or even your own pride. It's about them. It's about all of them. He reached out and very gently tucked the errant strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek for a moment, a whisper of a touch that sent fire racing through her veins. Yes, he said softly. It's about them. And it's about you. Me? I thought I was offering you a transaction, a fair trade, a name for a fortune. His grey eyes were intent on hers, holding her captive. I did not realize I was offering you this. He gestured vaguely at the hills, the sky, the world around them. A chance to be a part of something, a chance to build something, not just preserve it. You see people, Clara. You see them clearly. My father and grandfather never did. I am learning to, again, because of you. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. This was not in their agreement. This was not part of the plan. He was not supposed to look at her like that, as though she were the answer to a question he had not known he was asking. She was not supposed to feel this dizzying, terrifying pull toward him. Alexander, she began, but he shook his head. I know. The terms. The agreement. I remember. He stepped back, and the cold wind rushed in to fill the space between them. But I find, Miss Granby, that the terms are becoming inconvenient. That evening, they dined alone. The vast dining room was too cavernous, so the footman had set a small table in the library in front of the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the rain beat a gentle rhythm against the windows. It was impossibly intimate. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing. About her plans for the foundry, his hopes for a new system of crop rotation. About her mother, who had died when she was young, and his father, whom he had loved and loathed in equal measure. The barriers between them, built of pride and practicality, crumbled with every word. Finally, as the clock struck 11, a silence fell. It was not an awkward silence, but a full one, heavy with unspoken things. Clara looked at him across the table. The firelight gilded his strong features, softening them, making him look almost tender. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Clara, he said, her name a low caress on his lips. I said I would not press you. I said our marriage was a business arrangement. And I meant it. I still mean it. But I need you to know that is no longer all I want. He rose and walked around the table, stopping before her chair. He held out his hand. She took it, and he drew her gently to her feet. They stood close, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. When I came to you with my proposal, he murmured, looking down at her, I thought I was offering you a cage disguised as a partnership. But you have turned it into something else. You have given me hope. You have given me a future I had stopped believing in. He raised his free hand and traced the line of her jaw with his fingertips. I do not want a convenient wife. I want you, Clara, the woman who refused a duke because she valued her own freedom above all else. The woman who sees the worth in a lonely widow and a crumbling farm. I want my partner. In everything. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She, who never cried. She, who was made of steel and coal dust. She looked up at this proud, desperate, honourable man and saw her future reflected in his grey eyes. It was not the future she had planned. It was not the independence she had fought for. It was better. It was a future built not on a contract, but on a choice. Her choice. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. His skin was warm, slightly rough with the day's stubble. "Then stop talking, Your Grace," she whispered, a tremulous smile playing on her lips, "and kiss your heiress." He needed no further invitation. He bent his head, and his mouth met hers. It was not a gentle, tentative first kiss. It was acclaiming. It was fierce and sweet, and full of all the weeks of tension and denial. It was a promise. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Clara leaned her forehead against his chest and laughed, a sound of pure, astonished joy. "The Tun will never believe it," she murmured against his waistcoat. "The Coal Queen and the desperate Duke. A love match." He tipped her chin up, his smile warm and real. "Let them not believe it. We will know the truth. We will know that the heiress who refused the Duke was the only woman in the world who could save him, and the only one he could ever love." They were married a fortnight later in the small church on the Ashworth estate, surrounded by the tenants and villagers whose lives they would rebuild together. The London Tun, denied their grand spectacle, had to content themselves with the reports that filtered back, of a radiant bride in a simple gown of cream silk, of a groom who could not take his eyes off his wife, of a kiss at the altar that went on just a little too long to be proper. Clara Granby became Clara Thorne, the Duchess of Ashworth, but she remained in her own mind Josiah Granby's daughter, the Coal Queen, and now the saviour of a dukedom. She stood with her husband on the steps of the old manor, looking out at the hills that were now hers to protect, and felt a peace she had never known. Her father had wanted her to have a shield. He had not understood that she had never needed one. What she had needed was a partner, an equal, a man strong enough to accept her strength and desperate enough to value it above all else. She had found him, and together they would build an empire that would outlast them both. Not of coal, and not of ancient titles, but of something far more valuable: trust, respect, and against all odds, a love that had begun with a refusal and ended with a choice. Her choice. Forever. The end.
If you've